All right. Hey, everybody. We are back for another installment of All of the Avengers. This is brought to you. I am Van Allen Plexico, your host. And this is brought to you by the www.avengersassemble.net website, along with White Rocket Entertainment. Go to www.avengersassemble.net to see all the previous videos and quite a few, but a bunch of them, all the Avengers, all the way back to issue number 1. So this episode, we're going to be looking at 38, 39, and 40, the 3 issues where Hercules first shows up and starts hanging around the Avengers and getting involved in their adventures a little bit. I found these somewhat lackluster. We are in the era now. I'll go ahead and I'll talk about the cover in a minute, but I'll note that we are now firmly in the Roy Thomas writing era, but Roy really does write a lot like Stan Lee wrote. And so there are only a few things that I feel like are drastically different about how Roy writes these characters and their stories. They're both incredibly verbose, just words, filling up every page, crowding out every box. But as we go along here, we'll talk about some of the things that are slightly different. So here's the cover, Avengers number 38. We've got one of the classic floating heads covers. It's funny how the villain of the piece is shrunk down to a tiny little figure here, while the heroes are in a reverse L shape around Hercules. The corner box this issue has Cap, Hawkeye, Goliath, Jan, Wanda, and Pietro. All right. It is interesting, by the way, that red background. That is a very striking background, I think, for this issue. So I don't think this is going to be a very long episode. Even though I'm covering 3 issues, I don't have a whole lot to say about every detail of all 3, just a few highlights here and there. Okay, so we start out in our midst, an immortal, very much of a Stan Lee title that Roy Thomas is using here. Don Heck, by the way, does the art for all these issues, and I'm still fairly enamored of Don Heck's art. I don't know that George Bell's inking does it a lot of favors. It's okay, but I really do feel like Don Heck is woefully underrated as a Marvel artist of this era back in the 60s. In fact, this is 1966. Let me see. I want to get the exact volume 1, number 38, March 1967. Okay, so you'll note that these comics were usually cover dated about 3 months ahead. So this is an issue that probably came out around Christmas of 66. And was probably written and drawn and put together in the summer or fall, somewhere in the fall probably of 66. So we're talking the space program is really getting going. This is between Thunderball and You Only Live Twice in terms of James Bond movies. That's kind of fun, one way of how I think of things like this. So we start out with an argument between Goliath and Hawkeye, and Cap comes to break it up, which is in a long tradition that would follow of the first splash page being 2 Avengers having a quarrel and the other Avengers trying to break it up. Almost invariably, it results in a big fight and a whole lot of Avengers Mansion getting destroyed. So we find out after they fight a little bit that it's really mostly about Black Widow. Hawkeye wants Black Widow to be an Avenger, and Goliath doesn't. Now, all this is about their fight. You don't really find out what they're fighting about here, but it's kind of weird to see Hawkeye having a problem with Hank for a change instead of Cap, right? For the first almost 3 years of this comic, it was just Hawkeye riding on Cap, just constantly. I've talked so much about that, but here it's more he turns his ire to Hank Pym, And Hank even says to himself, I can't pinpoint any one reason why I don't want Black Widow in the Avengers, but somehow I can't shake my hunch that her admission would be a disastrous mistake. Okay, so that sets up a subplot that's going to be running through the next several issues of Black Widow and what she's actually up to. And we see that on the next page. Meanwhile, I think it's interesting. This is the issue where Hercules first starts getting associated with the Avengers too. And going forward, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that going forward, Hercules and Black Widow are always associated together in my mind in terms of the Avengers. They were together here in the Avengers in the same issues, whether they were members or not. And then, of course, later they are both charter members of the Champions. So I always kind of imagine, which is a strange, odd couple. They never really had anything like of a relationship between them. But for whatever reason, Black Widow and Hercules always just seem to kind of go together because they always pop up together in the comics. It's kind of odd. So meanwhile, Black Widow is in somewhere in the sprawling Manhattan jungle, and she thinks she's going to be accepted to the Avengers because last issue she helped them defeat an alien called Ixar, which I think we covered some time ago. And by the way, I did take a little hiatus, but I'm back now doing these episodes. Anyway, she gets in and is drugged by a gas, and we'll have to see coming up what happens to her. Now, we shift our attention to a battle at the peak of a timeless mountain, I guess Mount Olympus, between Hercules and Ares. And they're fighting and fighting. And the Enchantress appears from Asgard. And she extends these goblets with her, with carrying her esteem for them. And they both drink them. And apparently Ares is in alliance with the Enchantress, who is currently in exile from Asgard. And so the Enchantress drugs Hercules and basically puts a love potion on her. She dipped the flask into the fountain of Eros. That would not be the Eros that we're thinking of, the son of Mentor who lives on Titan and hangs out with Captain Marvel and so forth. This would be a different Eros. This would be like the Olympian godly Eros. So now Hercules thinks he's in love with the Enchantress. And so she's going to take him to Earth and get involved in things there. Thus speaking, the spellbound son of Zeus and his beauteous captor begin the long and torturous descent towards the world of mortals and toward a cataclysmic clash with the superpowered fighting group whom the Earth knows as the Avengers. All right. Meanwhile, the Avengers are having a special meeting, and Hawkeye tries to argue that because Iron Man and Thor don't show up, that means they don't object to the Black Widow becoming an Avenger. And so they're arguing still about it. And meanwhile, Black Widow wakes up and discovers she's been captured by Nick Fury, who sends her off on a secret mission. Now, this is all I'm really going to say about the Black Widow storyline. Nick Fury wants to send her on a secret mission. By the way, there's old Jasper Sitwell in the background, and I think Dum Dum Dugan of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the whole point here is that Natasha goes off on a secret mission, and everybody thinks she's like betraying the United States. Everybody thinks she's going back to the Soviet Union. She's no longer serving the United States. Let me see if I can make that. Yeah, you can see it a little bit better. Okay. So that's going to kind of run for the next few issues, the idea that everybody thinks the Black Widow is working for the communists or whatever again, when in fact she's on this secret mission for Nick Fury. Man, if something happened to Nick Fury, she'd be in deep trouble when it was over. All right. So the argument continues in Avengers Mansion, on and on and on. Hawkeye gets mad. And then Hercules and the Enchantress show up and start fighting the Avengers. And hold on we go with this. We see an interesting fight between Hercules and Goliath, and that's certainly worth seeing how that played out. Meanwhile, Quicksilver gets knocked out. The Enchantress knocks out Wanda. Meanwhile, Hank and Jan. Hawkeye. I'm gonna say, you see a blonde-headed guy with Jan, you think it's Hank. I'm like, wait a minute, how is Goliath fighting Hercules? And he's also on a date with Jan. But actually, no, Hawkeye and Jan end up going out to dinner, oddly enough. And they get a call from the Avengers. And continues with the battle back in Avengers Mansion. Trying to get to the good stuff here. And finally, Pym, see, this is the thing, is it's all very confusing. The action is not very straightforward in this issue, because Hercules looks like he's losing to Hank, and said, "Thou strikest out at him who hath vanquished thee, but give Hercules a mere moment to regain his footing. No, there's no need for further battle. The giant collapses. Everything going black. So then Wanda, same thing. Wasp attacks Hercules. I mean, it's just battle. And then finally, Zeus shows up and says, he calls him my errant son. Hear thou the words of Zeus. Thou hast shown thy disrespect for the law of Olympus by making the forbidden journey to the world of mortals without my leave. Now remember, Hercules was kidnapped, basically drugged and kidnapped by the Enchantress. And he says, nay, my father, for 'twas a sorceress who did bring Hercules here. And Hawkeye says, that's what I get for coming in late. I don't savvy any of this. And everybody else is like flabbergasted to see Zeus. And then Zeus basically says, hear my words, impudent one, because thou hast broken my supreme law, thou shalt remain in the world of mortals for the span of 1 year. Thus speaks Zeus. And so Hercules is stuck on Earth. Zeus is just not remotely interested in the fact that Hercules didn't come there on purpose. He was kidnapped. And Wanda even offers him an extra room. And they understand. They all know the Enchantress. So they're like, he's like, you dost thou offer refuge to him who tried to slay thee? She says, certainly it was all the Enchantress is doing anyway. It's like, it's the Enchantress. This is what she does. She's the Enchantress. She kidnaps gods and sends them to fight us every time, all the time. It's all good. And then, of course, Hank makes buddies with him. And of course, Wanda, I think that's Wanda. It looks like, I would think it would be something Jan would say, but Wanda says, an immortal among the Avengers, just like in the old days of like 10 issues ago. So then she says, I wonder, will Cap approve of our actions when he returns from his mysterious mission? And Quicksilver says, surely he shall. Who, my sister, who would not wish to be a host to Hercules? And Hawk says, personally, I'll bet at midnight he turns into Steve Reeves. Wasn't that the guy that played Hercules in the movies, I think? Anyway. So meanwhile, the Enchantress is lamenting the fact that she missed a chance and to take down the Avengers. And she starts wondering, maybe she actually has fallen in love with Hercules. And Hercules is sitting around saying he's battled titans and trolls, demons and dragons. And now he's exiled to the sphere of puny mortals. What unknown challenges shall I face ere I gaze once more on the shimmering spires of mighty Olympus? Well, we'll find out what challenges he'll face, because next issue, the Mad Thinker, that would be the guy that inked this issue. The Mad Thinker and the Trio of Terror. But Trio of Terror doesn't sound very good. It's just what all would fit in that little box. So in point of fact, they'll actually be called the Triumvirate of Terror, I believe. So, all right, I'm going to skip the letters page this issue. And we're going to go back to, I have to shrink back down again. Let's open up issue 39. All right, here comes 39. We got Hercules featured on the cover again. It's interesting that 2 covers in a row, a guy who's neither the villain nor a member of the Avengers is featured on the cover. But isn't that interesting? Okay. So the Torment and the Triumph, featuring the Mad Thinkers. It's not the trio anymore. It's the triumvirate of terror. So we're on the April 1966 issue now, I believe. We've got Goliath, Hawkeye, and Scarlet Witch held captive by the Mad Thinker and his triumvirate of terror, and Hercules fighting. All right, The Torment and the Triumph. That's a really good Stan Lee title, but again, Roy Thomas and Don Heck with George Bell, Artie Simek, and no credited colorist. They're just finding out the Black Widow is a traitor, and Hawkeye is devastated. Just a whole lot of text here I'm not going to sort through, but basically we do get a nice scene. There's Nick Fury with Dum Dum Dugan and Jasper Sitwell. By the way, I'm sure that most old-time Marvel fans are most familiar with Dum Dum Dugan as being one of Nick Fury's men in Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, but that was before my time. I never really read that, although I have put a trade paperback collection of Sergeant Fury on my Amazon wish list for the future. But I mostly know Jasper Sitwell from his guest starring in Iron Man in the late 70s when he was in love with Madame Mask. And I mostly know Dum Dum Dugan from the Godzilla comic, where he and Gabe chased Godzilla all over the country for about 20-something issues. One of my all-time favorite Marvel series. So anyway, Nick Fury and Dum Dum are arguing over why they're talking about why they've sent the Black Widow. Nick says something big is brewing behind the bamboo curtain, and that female's our one chance to find out what. She's kept her mouth shut so far about working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and not working for the communists or whatever. I'm betting her Avenger buddies are as much in the dark as Huntley and Brinkley. Now, that's a reference to the two news anchors on either ABC or NBC, one of those two. They were the main competition to Walter Cronkite back then. You had Cronkite on CBS, and you had David Brinkley and Chet Huntley as the anchor men on either ABC or NBC. Probably NBC. I forget which back then. Okay, that was before my time again, but I know that. All right, Hercules is working out. He gets distracted and tears up Pym's exercise equipment. Way to go, Herc. He gets a delivery. We find out that Hercules' new name he's going by is Mr. Powers. That sounds like it should be a superhero name by itself. Hawkeye is trying to track down Black Widow to talk sense into her. And the Mad Thinker is doing his usual thing where he calculates everything down to the minute and the second, planning something. By the way, what a great cover that Fantastic Four is. Blastar versus the FF. Looks like issue 62 they were up to at that point. I always wondered if anybody ever got the actual life-size Polaris nuclear submarine, 7 feet long, for $7, $1 a foot for the Polaris nuclear sub. It had to be cardboard, right? Or it couldn't have been actually like an actual plastic submarine. Fires actual rockets and torpedoes. That's pretty cool. Okay, I always wondered about that. So the Mad Thinker's drawing up his plans. Hawkeye's out looking around. Hawkeye runs into the first of the Triumvirate of Terror. This is a different Hammerhead. This is not the same, or if it is the same Hammerhead, it's not the same costume, not the same MO at all, but similar kind of way of attacking with his Hammerhead first. So they fight a little bit. That is one thing you can say about the Avengers during the mid-'60s is you got way more Hawkeye action than you would get over the next couple hundred issues, I think. So now we find out the Mad Thinker's involved. Hammerhead uses that distraction to knock out Hawkeye. And then we see these ladies looking at something, and it turns out they're looking at Mr. Powers. And I got to say, the way that Don Heck and Bell did the inks and the drawing on characters, they sure did make Hercules look like a typical villain of this era, right? If you look at Hercules' face right here, in fact, I'll switch over and make it bigger. If you look at Hercules here, does he not look like almost every master villain that appears in this era of Avengers? So, but it's Hercules, and he's checking out all the Earth girls who are reportedly easy, right? Mad Thinker still thinking. I like how he's always in that thinking pose, right? So the Avengers, Jan. Okay, so Hawkeye uses a condition blue code, which means danger. But condition blue is not quite a full alert. Do they ever use this again? I'm really curious. But condition blue is not a full alert. Only 2 members are to answer a code blue. So so Hank and Jan jump on one fly cycle. There they are on one fly cycle. And they get to this building where they're building a building, a construction site's what I'm looking for. And somebody dumps dirt on them. And it turns out it is the pile driver. Now, I got to pause here and say Hammerhead and Pile Driver being part of a team of villains. This sounds a lot like it ought to be the Wrecking Crew, right? So this is sort of the Wrecking Crew before it was the Wrecking Crew. And I'm not even sure. I mean, obviously, this Hammerhead is not in the Wrecking Crew. The Wrecking Crew is the Wrecker, Bulldozer, the Wrecking Ball guy, Thunderball, and one other, but I can't think who it is. I don't know if it's Pile Driver or not. It ought to be, though. It ought to be. So they fight. Yeah. Oh, I got another quick rabbit hole to dive down. I saw this. Be a super spy. Get the amazing new spy pen. Now I got to ask, how did this thing work, right? It says you can see through. See is in quotation marks. That's your first danger sign. If it says see, it's like you're not really seeing. We're just saying you're seeing. But it says see through walls like Solo and Ilya and the Man from U.N.C.L.E. I was going to say, when I looked at this picture, I thought that looks a lot like Napoleon Solo and Ilya, Karakin, something like that, Kakin, whatever his name is, from the Man from U.N.C.L.E., but Kuryakin. Yeah. Anyway, it's a precision optical instrument with 3 lenses. And I really want to know how I'm going to say it has mirrors that do something, and you look in it and it looks around the corner or something. But still, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I think it's just like a mirror. Oh, it can also be a powerful telescope. Interesting. So mirrors, lenses, and how much does it cost? $1.98 plus 27-cent shipping. Interesting. Okay, I'd tried that out. But they weren't advertising that by my time. Okay, so Pile Driver knocks out Hank and Jan. The Mad Thinker's still thinking. By the way, this is not a good Don Hick panel. That just doesn't look right at all to me. It's not good. Okay, now we find out Hercules plays the guitar. Who knew? It looks like even like an electric guitar he's got plugged in there, and he's of course he's performing ballads about himself because Hercules, right? Okay. What a heavenly masculine voice. He sings like he really lived that folk rock number. He's a one-man happening, say the ladies. All right. So meanwhile, in Avengers Mansion, the Mad Thinker and which one is that? A third one, I guess, show up. And they're fighting. He's got boots. I've seen yet what his name. Oh, Thunderboot, of course. Thunderboot. What a great name. And by great, I mean terrible. So they fight. Something Jan does causes a feedback loop or something, and she gets a negative reaction in her hex. She can feel the power flowing back into her. It knocks her out, and she's going to suffer another blow of this way in the next issue where she just like starts to faint. So I don't love the idea of suddenly turning the Scarlet Witch into like this I faint every other issue, right? Steve Englehart later on is going to do that with the Vision, where he kind of freezes up occasionally. And I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of the hero's suddenly vulnerability being that they just can't do anything. They just collapse. That's, I mean, that you can't fight that. It's just frustrating. All right, so they bring the prisoners to the Mad Thinker and got them all chained up, because here's the big flaw in the Mad Thinker's plan. He doesn't know Hercules has moved in. He doesn't know they have a tenant in Avengers Mansion. I love this, right? The big flaw he didn't take into account in his master plan is that Hercules lives there. So Hercules comes home from carousing around with the ladies and playing his guitar, and he sees supervillains. And so he does what Hercules does. He swings into action, punching supervillains. And he's fighting them, and he's fighting. The Mad Thinker's like, because of unforeseen elements, my plan must fail unless Hercules is destroyed within 22 seconds. Well, he's not going to be destroyed in 22 seconds. Hank gets loose, and now all the Avengers get loose. I first thought Hercules was breaking Quicksilver's wrist, because he's got him by the wrist and it says snap. I think he's breaking him loose, which I still would be afraid he would break his wrist doing that. And so we're all out of room, faithful one, so we can't show you the ensuing onslaught in rapturous detail, but perhaps a typical reaction below will suffice. So in other words, Roy doesn't plan this well enough for there to be enough panels left to show the Avengers actually defeating the villains of the issue. So the actual fight takes place off camera. Roy, come on now. You gave us pages of all this other stuff, and we get off camera actual triumph over the trio. But by this point, the Mad Thinkers escaped, and we get this same reaction we're going to get from the Submariner next issue, which is, well, they've beaten me this time, but next time, man, next time they're going to really get it. And he does the exact same thing, probably even the next to last panel again. And then Hercules is like, cool, see y'all, good night, bye, take it easy. What a superhero that guy'd make. Well, he just did. And they talk about how lonely it must be to be a god destined to walk among mere mortals, a theme that will also be returned to with the Silver Surfer comic, when he's got his own, basically he's like a space god, honestly, right? So off he's like, see ya, going to bed. And next issue, the Submariner attacks. Couple of things I wanted to mention here. The letter call this issue is full of people complaining. Dan Slade here of Seymour, Connecticut says Avengers 36 was below the usually high standards of Marvel. The story was far out. The art wasn't so hot either. What was the Black Widow there for? Question mark. It's bad enough she's always hanging around the Avengers headquarters. Now she goes on a mission with them. She isn't an Avenger, so what's going on here? I'm surprised they let her go along. Please don't let her join the Avengers. So this person takes the side of Hank. And while you're at it, get rid of the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. So in other words, no women. I guess Jan can stay maybe, but she's so small we can't even see her. So get rid of all the women we can actually see. And then the next guy down here says Goliath and the Wasp should be booted out of the Avengers. All right. So between the two of them, we're getting rid of all the women plus Hank. And honestly, there's times Hank acts that way. So yeah. And there's a funny note here where I guess Roy at this point, right? Either Stan or Roy, whoever's writing the letter call, it calls out. He calls out Don Heck for drawing Hawkeye's quiver strap on the wrong shoulders. As if dashing Don Heck doesn't have enough trouble just remembering that Hawkeye's strap goes over his left shoulder. And it's the Black Widow that's working for S.H.I.E.L.D., not the Wasp. Oh my goodness. It's getting hot and heavy there. All right, let's wrap this up with issue 40. Where we still have Hercules in the front center. Hercules 3 issues in a row has been front row center. But we get another dude that goes around with no shirt on and is strong in the Submariner. So this is issue 40, May of 66. And so this one actually came out in early 66, right? Have I got the years all totally confused now? No, May of 67. All right, so we're on into 1967 now. My bad. All right, so I love the little Jan there. It's cute, but there they are. No Pietro, no Wanda. It's the other three plus Hercules, and we still wonder where Cap is. Cap's been missing for a little while now. Once again, we're in a wrecked Avengers mansion, and it's suddenly the Submariner. I feel like they've used that title before, but maybe not. And they're using their powers to clean up the wreckage when Wanda suddenly passes out. So they freak out. They take her upstairs. Hawkeye's still worried about the Black Widow while everybody else is worried about Wanda, who's passed out. And here's the Black Widow on an experimental jet she has swiped. And Thunderbolt Ross, who is the J. Jonah Jameson of the U.S. Army, because immediately when anybody goes to J. Jonah Jameson and says there's a villain on the loose, what's Jameson always think? He's in cahoots with Spider-Man. Well, if the Black Widow's up to something, she must be in cahoots with Hulk, because that's Hulk. That's who the Hulk is always, that the Hulk is who he's always chasing. All right. So now we switch to Atlantis, where Namor is. You first think he's fighting bad guys, or is he a bad guy? See, Namor is all right. Is there any character in Marvel that is more right down the middle gray between a good guy and a bad guy than Namor? I know there's probably another handful, because there's so many Marvel characters, right? I know that there's probably a handful that are kind of clustered around that line. But if you do the Venn diagram of hero and villain, right at the dead center of that overlap is Namor, right? I mean, he probably appears more as hero, but he was one of the co-stars of Super Villain Team Up for a while. So, I mean, yeah. And he was certainly a villain early in the pages of both Avengers and Fantastic Four. In fact, I would argue that there's probably no character that had more guest appearances in early issues of Marvel Comics than Namor. I mean, you want to say Doctor Doom, and he's probably up there too, but I think Namor even more than Doctor Doom. I'm gonna put it out there and make a bold statement that Namor had more guest appearances, like in the first 5 years, right, of Marvel, than anybody else. And I may be wrong. I don't know who else it could be. Probably not Spider-Man, honestly. Spider-Man never shows up in Avengers, and he rarely showed up in Fantastic Four. Later on, I think probably in the 70s it's Spider-Man, and in the 80s and 90s it's probably Wolverine, right? For a while in the late 70s, the Fantastic Four popped up in everybody else's comic too, because they were very popular. But I think at the beginning it was probably Namor, which is odd, isn't it? But strange. But there you go. Anyway, so we find out Namor is really just this like an exhibition, and one of his advisors wants to talk to him, and he goes and shows him there's a submarine coming. So Namor, which is ironic, because look on the opposite. Look on the opposite side of the page where they see a submarine coming. It's too bad they couldn't have tied this into some kind of a cross promotion, like you get a free Submariner action figure to fight when you have this submarine. That would be cool. But anyway, so Namor fights the submarine, gets it stuck in the kelp or whatever, and leaves it to get help. Now, here we find out where Captain America has been missing for the last however long. Apparently, Cap has been off dealing with the Red Skull and the Cosmic Cube in the pages of Tales of Suspense leading up to and through issue 90 of that comic. Remember, Tales of Suspense is the book that Cap and Iron Man shared together for a while. So Cap warns the other Avengers. I got the hiccups. I'm sorry. Cap warns the other Avengers about the Cosmic Cube. I guess this must be the first time it's appeared in Marvel, because they all don't know what it is. Of course, certainly it's going to become a mainstay MacGuffin type, object in years to come in Marvel. And when Thanos gets a hold of it, well, it's usually the Red Skull, right? Usually the Red Skull has the Cosmic Cube because he tries to use it to create like Nazi world, Nazi America, in the 20th century. But But later, of course, Thanos gets a hold of it, and you know what things he's going to kind of do with it. Look, fellows, expect Steve Buscemi to be there. All right, so they're talking about Cap has it, and they find out it may be on a small island in the Caribbean, so they take off to go look for it, which is going to coincidentally run them into the Submariner, who's down there mad about the submarine invading his realm. So the Avengers are going to start fighting the Submariner. I like how Don Heck drew the Submariner. It looks like a real alien, doesn't he? Almost looks like Mr. Spock or something. So the Avengers fight Namor for a little while, and along the way, Hercules spills the beans that there is a cosmic cube. And Namor is immediately like, Cosmic cube? That sounds cool. I have to go get that. I'll go ask a fish where that is. I kid you not. So they knock Namor into the water, which is, of course, the last thing you want to do with Namor. I love how the Avengers know the Submariner really well, and yet they're like, throw him in the water. That'll get rid of him. That's like throwing Brer Rabbit into the briar patch. You don't throw the Submariner into the water. All right, so bear in mind here, they throw him in the water. He immediately asks a fish, who then finds the cosmic cube. He goes and gets it. He has it. And then he comes back out of the water with a fish creature he's created using it. They fight. So there's the Avengers are fighting the fish monster, which is actually called the Amalga Beast. So I think he's a member of Amalgam Comics. And Hercules and Namor go round 2. And somewhere along in here, the Olympians' words ring true. My power derives from the eternal sea, and with each moment away from it, my strength wanes. So there's several moments in here that Namor says, I've been away from the sea too long. And I'm like, you were just in it. 5 seconds ago, you were just in it. And it's right. You're on an island. Okay. All you got to do is walk about 10 steps that way, and you're in the water, Namor. You're literally in the middle of the Caribbean Sea complaining that you're too far away from water. Okay. So they fight, and once again, he gets in the water. Oh, he uses the cosmic cube to open up a crevice in the ground filled with water for him to jump in. And then Hercules jumps in there and they start fighting. Between Goliath and Hawkeye, they take out the Amalga Beast. And then the other thing that Namor did that I thought was kind of interesting, Namor ordered the cosmic cube to turn itself into something Namor would wear. A little locket thing, a little brooch, whatever you want to call it, on a chain. And that way he can have it with him without people knowing it's the cosmic cube. Well, Jan suspects that it's the cosmic cube, and so she breaks it and it falls in the water. And Namor is like, well, dang, without that, I'm kind of in trouble. So he goes jumping in the water to get away. The ground closes back up inexplicably so that the cosmic cube is lost. And I remember I warned you about this. Namor says, even I dare not challenge both the military and the Avengers, not yet. I must return to Golden Atlantis to consider my course for the future. When next Namor appears, he shall need no cosmic cube to defeat his enemies, which must be a Roy Thomasism, because again, the Mad Thinker said almost the exact same thing in the last issue on the last page, bottom half of the last page. And then lastly, the little amulet that used to be the cosmic cube ends up all the way down to the Mole Man's realm. And you're like, oh, Lord, the Mole Man with the cosmic cube, sign me up for some of that. But unfortunately, we don't get it because we're in the last 3 panels of the issue. He says, never have beheld its like. It seems to shimmer as though it has life of its own. But why do I stand here gazing at this, at what is obviously a mere toy, an infant's building block? Away with it. I have no time to waste on worthless baubles. It is weapons that the Mole Man needs, not a child's gaudy plaything, and he throws it away like the ring of power in Gollum's cave. And so all that's left is that Hawkeye says to Jan, "You outdid us all, lady. We provided the muscle to slow down Namor, but you stopped him cold. Good way to go, Jan, and way to go, Hawkeye." By the way, I failed to mention this. This is a really important note I wanted to mention earlier. When they're talking to Captain America, in fact, let me see if I can go back and show you. This is an important moment if it was in here. Yeah. When Captain America is talking about needing help and everything, Hawkeye, I know this issue is full of revelations for me. I'm just shocked. Hawkeye says, "Tune her in, Wasp. Tune her in fast, Wasp," meaning the control Waspy. "That's my buddy talking, and he might need help." And then a bit later, Hank says, "I, for one, was just recalling how you used to be Cap's self-appointed gadfly. Now you act like a charter member of his fan club." And Hawkeye dismisses the whole thing. He's gone from turned heel to turned face on with regard to Cap, right? He dismisses the whole thing with, "Let's just say my eyesight's improved, big man." All right. So after 3 years of Stan Lee grinding us down with this Hawkeye that just rides Cap like a bronco, just rides him to the ground. Oh, I've hated Hawkeye over these issues. All of a sudden, it is definitely a welcome change. So I will say this to dear Roy Thomas, thank you. Thank you for making Hawkeye no longer such a jack toward Cap. But why? Why? Because, let's just say my eyesight's improved. Okay. Whatever works. Whatever you say, Hawkeye. All right. So we wrap the issue up then as we were before. We've kind of temporarily here seemed to be traded Captain America for Hercules. And I mean, that's fine in small doses. The Avengers kind of need Cap. Cap needs the Avengers. But it's neat if he's going to be gone for a few issues. Hercules makes an interesting, during this phase in his career, okay, he's not the big goofball really yet. Hercules, though we certainly saw the potential for it with the guitar serenading of songs about himself to the ladies at the bar, right? But if we're going to have a Hercules, this is the Hercules I like doing a guest starring role in the Avengers. He's kind of uncertain. He's very cocky in a way, but he also realizes the Avengers are very heroic and competent, and he doesn't, you know what I mean? He's not throwing his weight around. He's not talking down to them. This is a very interesting Hercules. He's a very serious Hercules, right? He's not carousing quite. I mean, a little bit with his guitar fest and whatever. But I don't know. I kind of like this Hercules. And it's interesting, too. We've got the Black Widow kind of behind the scenes, something cooking with her. So, even though this comic at this point is supposed to be Cap's kooky quartet plus Hank and Jan, we've got an increasing number of hangers on around the edges with Hawkeye. With Hercules, with Black Widow, and then maybe Namor. Again, he's been popping in and out of this comic since almost the first issue, almost the second issue, I guess, or whenever it was. So I don't know. I kind of like that this is the beginning now of the Avengers having a lot of characters, not just the members, right? And in fact, think about that. The person that wrote that letter we talked about in the last issue took issue with the idea that they would even feature any characters that were not Avengers members. And I think that's one of the things that Roy really wants to do here is have non-members kind of show up alongside the Avengers so he can keep shaking up the formula a little bit. I think that's fine. I think as long as you keep the core members intact and keep them in character. And I'm not entirely sure about Hawkeye being in character. Again, I'm much more willing to forgive Hawkeye being out of character if it's an improvement. And this is a drastic improvement. So I don't want to complain, right? I don't want to complain that Hawkeye is out of character when it's making him better but he is out of character. Okay, so I'm not complaining, I'm just noting. So it's an interesting mix, right? I just think it's an interesting mix that Roy Thomas is putting together here of core Avengers, and then which is like Cap's Cookie Quartet, Hank and Jan, who are founding Avengers, but they're kind of around the periphery too, and then Hercules and Black Widow. So this is a nice little set of Avengers we have right now. We actually have we're on the verge of having 8, which is a good number, I think, right? Because 7's sort of historically the base number. So 8 is a good number to give you a little extra spice. All right. Next comes Diablo and Dragon Man, which again, this is a very Fantastic Four, a lot of Fantastic Four stuff going on there, which is interesting since it's Roy Thomas and not Stan and Jack. All right. And then the Avengers issue, the Avengers Assemble letter call. I think you've got the Avengers just about perfect if you'd only stop having one or another of them quitting temporarily so often and feature one or more of the old Avengers in guest spots. Give the Wasp back her old outfit and so on. Talk about Cap a little bit. Bucky Barnes was dead weight, and so on. All right, that's the one I wanted to mention. So, all right, so they're talking there about, get rid of what was it? Give the Wasp her old outfit, bring back Cap, stop having them quit so often. That's fair. All right, so those were Avengers. That was issues 38, 39, and 40. There we go. Slide back to a minute. There. Avengers 38, 39, and 40. I want to let you know I'll be covering probably 41 through 40, I think 4 coming up next, because I'm looking forward to this one. Blitzkrieg in Central Park with one of my favorite villains, the Super Adaptoid. All right, gang. So we're going to hop through 41 through 44 in our next issue, and then our next appearance. And then the next one after that, we'll certainly cover 45 and 46 because we're getting into the old Marvel triple action reprints that I read as a kid, and I love them. That's been all of the Avengers for this episode. Join me back in a few days as we'll pick up with the 40s. All right. We will see you guys again down the road. Please go to www.avengersassemble.net. And if you can, join up the Patreon. We would certainly appreciate all the help. Until next time, Avengers.